That's 212-769-1925.
This is your number one station.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner.
It's Hanukkah time, which means you're probably reaching for high-quality olive oil.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. His family has been in the United States over 100 years. A Yankee Doodle. Father is a judge in Long Island. Mother is an attorney. He was living the American dream and decided to come in touch with his Jewish roots, became first a Chabad Chassid, and now he's a Satmar Chassid. He's currently in accounting, living in Kiryas Shul, New York. He's also a writer. Spencer Schmelke Diamond joins us, grew up in a traditional home in the North Shore of Long Island, discovered Yiddishkeit through Chabad. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure. I know that you've been speaking out about your experiences. Tell us about growing up. Did you grow up with what kind of Judaism? A traditional, what does that mean exactly?
Sure. So I just want to actually take a step back and correct a few things. My father is currently retired. He actually also became a Baal Tshuva much later in life. Not my credit at all. He's an exceptional person, Talmid Chacham, and his relationship with the Eibishter is not interdependent on mine. But
Did he become religious because of you? I know you speak
no,
about...
No. I've said no. He did not.
But he had always had a penchant for Yiddishkeit. I think it was more than your mother, from what I saw.
He did. I would say it was about the same, different. Growing up, we were traditional, I always call it like Manhattan-style Judaism. We always had two Siddharim, we always went to shul, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right? We belonged to a Reform temple, which is where I was raised, where I was bar mitzvahed. We were not necessarily aware of a lot of concepts, right? But I think that's more of I would use the term, a result of the institution to which we belonged, as opposed to anything lacking in our home education, right? So like the bar mitzvah, we didn't do tefillin, but that was only because that's just not done in the vast majority of Reform congregations, right? So, we went to shul when there was a yurtzeit. We went, throughout the year. Friday night services were always a big thing. And especially being in Great Neck, going through that Great Neck public schools, aside from the social and academic intensity of it, Judaism was very, very much a thing there. You kind of knew you were Jewish because everybody was Jewish.
Well, they have a great public school in Great Neck, so you have a lot of Jewish students that go there, or went there, I should say.
Yes, a fabulous public school. Unfortunately, today, the new generation that's moved into the public school is not really Jewish at all. And Baruch Hashem, Great Neck has gotten much firmer, so a lot of the kids are in yeshivas now, which is amazing.
But you're growing up, so what do you know about Judaism? You had Friday nights. Was it a kosher Friday night dinner? Did you go out to restaurants? What did you do? How did you celebrate the Sabbath?
Okay, so we would celebrate Shabbos. I wouldn't say every week, and we did not keep a kosher home. We very much enjoyed that, kosher style, like, remember Ben's Kosher Deli, right? All of that kind of stuff. What's the other one? Katz's on the Lower East Side?
That's the Lower East Side, right.
I was never there, but that was kind of the style that it was. We identified with the culture of it. And we would make occasional Shabbos dinners, and my mother would light candles, and, there were just the overall parts of it that were not there. For example, for Passover, right? We knew that the first 2 days were Yom Tif, and nobody who was Orthodox worked, but I didn't know that the last 2 days were also Yom Tif. I didn't know about Shavuos or Shavuos or any of these things. So, I mean, very little, and I often joke that when I first started exploring religion, there were so many things that I just was unaware of. I mean, like, and this is so funny to say it now, and it's almost so dorky, but, could you even flush a toilet on Shabbos, right? Because if you couldn't turn on the light, maybe you also couldn't flush a toilet. Like, how would I know?
So who'd you ask that question to?
And thankfully since then that issue's been resolved.
Yeah, of course. It's but when you said, let's look at Pesach and Passover. So you had a Seder. So how did you celebrate the rest of the holiday? What did you do? Anything? I know you didn't know what Chalamod was about, the intermediary days. You know what the last days were, but
No, we didn't. I did not know that growing up. I'm not sure. Is my mic? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm using a new mic, so let me know if the feed is bad. We celebrated it by, let's say, we'd go to restaurants, right? Almost everybody does this. I was actually just reading a book now that there's a famous deli in Manhattan called Barney Greengrass, and they would have matzahs on the table, right? Boxes of machine matzahs. Yeah. In every high-end in a restaurant in Manhattan, on Long Island, you would often see there would be Sadarim. We never went to a Seder there, but Chalamoid, people would come and you'd say, okay, I'll take your steak, but I'm not gonna have the bread. Instead of the bread basket, send me matzah because it's Passover.
so there's some restaurants actually stock matzah on premises.
Oh yes, so many of yeah, sure.
Well, Barney
Sure.
Greengrass in Manhattan, that's a fish restaurant. I don't think they serve meat. In fact, the owner goes, I believe, to the Jewish Center Shabbos morning. That probably opens up the store. But I think some of the other restaurants were probably more blatantly treif that you went to and other people went to, correct?
Yeah, no, I just read about Barney Greengrass. I was never there. But everything from I remember the Palm, which is a chain of steakhouses. I'm sure that Morton's, all of those high-end restaurants.
Peter Luger is a big non-kosher
Yes,
restaurant.
yes,
So you're telling me they
absolutely.
serve matzah with the tray food on Pesach?
Absolutely, yeah. I've always said to my friends in Williamsburg that they should walk over to Luger's on Pesach sometime and just see it, because you probably will find people sitting there with boxes of matzahs. I knew so many people who Rosh Hashanah, Peter Luger dinner was like as high end as it could get. We didn't do that. My parents held a more traditional stance on those things. But that was part of the culture. People wore, a very big status symbol, but also an issue of pride was your Star of David necklace, right? And, there's this company, David Yurman. It was very, very popular when I was growing up. And they made the Star of David, and that was like the thing you had to have.
So growing up, how important was Judaism to you?
It was very important. It was very important. The world of Orthodox Judaism was absolutely, it almost seemed forbidden to me,
What do you think
even,
about Orthodox Jews? What do you think about Hasidim, for example? Did you
okay,
have
so
any
Hasidim I
contact?
had no idea about, frankly, other than Fiddler on the Roof. That was my only exposure to Hasidim growing up. Orthodox Judaism, we actually had some modern Orthodox neighbors. And it's funny because they were just, regular New Hyde Park, Great Neck, and Israel people. To us, they were like, this, like Yerushalmi Jews, and we were friendly, but oh, they can't do this, they can't do that, they won't eat this, they won't eat that. There's so many rules. How can they live? It was very much a world that was sealed off to me. And I'm talking about young Israel. I'm not talking about Satmar or Bubba or any of these places.
So what happened? So you're growing up, you have this Reform background, and you have some traditions of Judaism, but not a lot. So at what age did you decide that you want more?
So I had always sort of had a spiritual inkling and an inclination, and happens to be that I don't know if you remember this, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I wasn't coming of age then, but when I was, getting into my late childhood, you had a lot of push for Kabbalah Center.
Sure,
I'm not
Madonna
going to get
was
in,
very big, but
and I was just about, I was not going to say her name, but I remember seeing Tefillin for the very first time through her, because it wasn't just her, but it was just a rush of celebrities who were going to the Kabbalah Center. And I, at one point, telephoned them to ask if I could go on one of their events. And the only reason I didn't was because it was, like $3,000 for a Shabbos. And I'm just making that number up, but it was some extraordinary number. And, obviously I don't want to get into the hashkufic thing about the Kabbalah Center, but it definitely did its job. And it brought out a spiritual awareness to a lot of people. So I was kind of looking for more. And one year, Erev Yom Kippur, I coincidentally, was also kind of a loner growing up. I did not have a lot of friends. And I think that isolation was because I always found that world a little bit off-putting. And also, growing up sort of in the spotlight through my father's campaigns and everything else, I didn't really connect to other kids. But I had heard about this thing called the Chabad House that people in Long Island went to in my school. And I thought it was kind of like a JCC. I mean, I had no idea what it was. Chabad House. It's a house where you can go and hang out, you know. So I called Erev Yom Kippur, and I spoke to somebody on the phone, and I said, "Hello, I'd like to come for Kol Nidre. Can I buy a ticket?" And he said, "Well, we don't sell tickets, but come anyway." I would later know that this man was the shliach himself, one of the most prominent shluchim in America, if I may say so, and a wonderful man, somebody who I'm connected with to this day, Rabbi Yossi Gazinski. I went, and again, I was 14 years old at the time, and Reform Judaism was very much operatic and theatric in the way that the services were structured, and they'd have these hired choirs that would sit in this box, kind of off to the center of the bima.
Did you have an organ? You had an organ, right? Okay.
Of course. And then I think today they've kind of moved past that into like guitar, because I don't think anyone knows how to play an organ anymore. We had, but choirs, you'd have choirs rented out, with literally some of the shows in Great Neck, I remember, trained opera singers. It was an incredibly theatric experience, and it's fine to enjoy it once, but it was really getting a little bit trite, and their connection wasn't there. It was just sitting in the pews and listening to this singing and speeches about making the world a better place. And I needed something more, and I walked into this Chabad house. My friend's mother dropped us off. It was like 2 or 3 of us. They had just started construction on their new building. It was in Great Neck, and they're not even davening inside the shul. They take us to this tent that's overlooking the Long Island Sound in Great Neck and Kings Point. And I just see a group of Hasidim with these kaputas, the frocks, and the hats, and the beards. And I was like, what did I just get myself into? It was this moment of like fight or flight. I was like, okay, what do I do here? And I picked up a siddur. I didn't even, and I remember just seeing the intensity with which they davened. Those people, and obviously not everyone there was Lubavitch. You had modern Orthodox Jews, you had everybody who, under the tent, literally a big tent party. That was a big tent service. And the only word that I could use is Devaikis. It was just magnificent to behold.
So you were impressed by that, and what happens next?
It was very inspirational, and it was like a light was turned on inside of me and I hate to be like overly spiritual, but it was like a light in my neshama came out. So what happened next was that I kind of realized that I wanted this, and then I kind of tried to jump too far into it head first. Didn't really work, and my parents were not at all prepared for this. And you drop your kid off on a Friday, he comes home and decides he wants to become Orthodox. So no, it didn't really work in the beginning. And I kind of made a deal with my parents that until I turned 18 and I became, a legal adult, I wouldn't change my life that drastically. But I did sort of make it in my heart to take baby steps. So, a year, I started going back to services more and more. In that year, so that was September, obviously, was Yom Kippur. And then January, we had taken a trip to Puerto Rico, and there was a Chabad house there, this incredible shliach, Rabbi Zarchi, and he put tefillin on me for the very first time in my life. And he was like, I remember it like it was yesterday. Did you ever wrap tefillin? No, what's that? And he said, oh, let's go, come on. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. And somewhere there's a picture of us together. I actually found it recently, and I wish I could get in contact with him and send it to him. But I joined a conservative shul instead of a reform one.
Was there much difference that you
Oh my
found?
gosh. Oh my gosh, huge, huge. The conservative liturgy, and again, I think the conservative movement today is probably not what it was 15 years ago. Like in terms of, I think they've changed a lot, but back then they were basically using the Art Scroll Siddur. The only difference was that they had like one page was non-egalitarian in the tefillas and the other page was. I remember it was like 232A for the Amida and then 232B for the egalitarian, where they would say, Avrim Suri, right? Um,
So you weren't satisfied with what you were getting at the conservative synagogue?
no, I was. I
You were
mean,
getting?
because
Okay.
it was a huge step in the right direction. I mean, remember, conservative, they tried to keep Shabbos, right? They weren't, obviously, in according to our views, right? But they were definitely much more grounded in tradition. I was putting on tefillin much more, from the time that I started to the time that I left. And then, of course, you give up your tripe, right? Like you give up your straight up tripe. So first, no bacon and no shrimp, and then, a few months later, like you go out to the restaurant, and it'd be at like I don't, TGI Fridays, and there's no cheese on the burger, right? Then you go like a little bit after that, you have to wait like a half hour and then an hour for the ice cream after the steak. So it was baby steps, and they were wonderful baby steps. And along the way, I would sort of dabble in a little bit more when I could. I'd pop into Chabad houses if I was traveling. Um, and again, this was kind of a silent agreement that I made with myself that by the time I turned 18, I would do this.
And did you wait till you were 18, or did you sound like you were in progress way before 18?
Yeah, no, I waited till I was 18, and then I was not doing it by the 18. I had started college, which was a very, strange and experience for everybody who does. And my life was sort of, I had a wonderful life. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. And it was so enjoyable. I was a very good student, so I'd work incredibly hard the whole week in school. And then Friday nights, we'd run out to dinner, right? That was like the big thing, to go on the Miracle Mile in Long Island and eat at this restaurant and eat at that restaurant. And, I remember one of my teachers in school said that I should write Zagat's. Zagat's is this like restaurant
That's what
review book that's like this thick, right?
So you went to every non-kosher restaurant, so you knew a lot of them, and a lot
Oh,
of
I knew all of them, and I could have reviewed all of them. There's only like one that I never tried, and I still give my mother a hard time. I'm like, I never got to try it, but it's all right. I'll find out in the
and
next
your
world.
parents say when they see a change in you, and I know you made a deal to wait till 18. How were they reacting to the fact that you were going through this change?
They were supportive, but there were moments that were shocking, right? Like I will never forget. I went to this summer camp when I was after 11th grade, and it was called the Julian Krinsky Camps and Programs. It was this pre-college program because, we didn't work hard enough during the year. We had to like do more in the summer, and that was what we did. And they had like an Orthodox branch, a modern Orthodox branch called Yesh Shabbat. And I went one day for I went one Shabbos for services for davening, and I mean I was blown away by it. I loved it. Dinner afterwards, everything was incredible. And then I went for for chakras, and I didn't own a pair of tefillin, and I've told this story so many times, and it never gets old. I was 16 at the time. He was 13. Modern Orthodox booker from Woodsburg in the Five Towns kind of befriended me, and I said to him, could I don't have to fill in, and he said, well, you can put mine on. And I was like, really? You're sure? Like that's a big thing to trust somebody with. And he said, no, we're all brothers. We're gonna, this is our thing. We put on tefillin, we share with each other. And I actually wrote that story up in the Ami magazine, going back about 6 years ago. And I never expected that he would get it because, so many years had passed, and he wound up getting his hands on it, and we reconnected, and I was at his wedding and he was at my wedding. And it just goes to show you the length that a Ahavas Yisrael can bring.
Wonderful story. Our guest is Spencer Schmelke Diamond. Grew up in a traditional home in the North Shore of Long Island. His father was a judge, his mother was an attorney, and he gave up the American dream to become first a Chabadnik and then a Satmar Chassid. We'll continue our conversation right after these messages. If you'd like to participate, our numbers are 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. You want to email us, great way to get your questions answered, zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. Coming up a little while, we'll speak to Dr. Robert Wolf about the Torah codes. Is Mamdani, can you find him in the Torah codes? We'll speak to him about that, and then we'll speak to Holocaust survivor, 85 years old, banned from a public school from speaking in Brooklyn, Sammy Steigman. We'll talk about that as well. All this upcoming. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. This is the Talkline Network.
It's Hanukkah time, which means you're probably reaching for high-quality olive oil. Whether it's for crisping latkes, kindling your menorah, or finding the perfect hostess gift, there's one oil that truly does it all. Introducing extra virgin olive oil from UJA, fresh from the olive groves of northern Israel, and the undisputed star of the UJA swag shop this holiday season. And yes, there are plenty of other great options too. But the best part? Every purchase supports UJA's powerful work, helping Israel recover and rebuild, meeting needs for struggling New Yorkers, fighting anti-Semitism, and amplifying joyful Jewish life. That's oil with sizzle and purpose. Endorsed by Israel's Olive Board. Yes, that's the thing. This 100% cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil is ready to be your next kitchen staple or the perfect gift for friends. Elevate your Hanukkah traditions and add meaning to the moments that matter with olive oil from Israel. Order now at shop.ujafedny.org. That's shop.ujafedny.org. The olive oil that does it all.
If your child needs urgent care, Maimonides' brand new Children's Emergency Department is there for you. Opened last month, Brooklyn's largest children's emergency department is staffed by doctors from Brooklyn's only children's hospital, which was recently ranked #1 in the entire country. As the only pediatric trauma center in Brooklyn, Maimonides can handle emergencies that no one else can, right in Borough Park. And Maimonides understands our community like no other hospital. They've taken care of us for more than 100 years. Maimonides' new Children's Emergency Department is located at 48th Street and 10th Avenue. The doctors and nurses are trained to handle any situation, and they will always put the needs of you and your child first.
Want to join a network designed to increase your sales, reduce your expenses, and bring new customers to your company? Our members lower their overhead by paying with barter dollars from their accounts instead of cash from their pockets.
Barter Save brought me new clients, which funded my advertising and brought me new cash customers.
And I use my barter dollars to pay for the DJ, photographer, and caterer of my daughter's sweet 16.
Visit bartersaves.com to find out if you qualify for this innovative way of growing your business.
Our member base consists of thousands of business owners, everything from restaurants to retail stores to professional services, medical services, home improvement contractors, beauty services, as well as travel. Barter is professional, organized, modern trading and America's best kept secret. It gives businesses a competitive advantage and puts cash back in their pockets. Do business smarter? Use Barter. Contact us at 800-9-BARTER or visit us at bartersaves.com.
Have you ever felt that pull to Israel, to live in the land where our ancestors walked, where the future of the Jewish people is being built every single day? Well, here's your chance. Your dream of Aliyah is closer than you think. At Nefesh B'Nefesh, we don't just facilitate Aliyah, we make it happen. We'll connect you with vibrant communities, cut through the red tape, and guide you every step of the way. Whether it's families settling in the Galil, doctors making a difference in Israeli hospitals, or students finding their niche in a new homeland, you can be part of history. Over 85,000 Olim, families, professionals, soldiers, and retirees have already made the move. Israel needs you, your energy, your skills, and your passion. This is your moment. Don't just dream it, live it. Visit us at nbn.org.il today and see how you can make Aliyah a reality. That's nbn.org.il. Nefesh B'Nefesh, it's your time to come home.
Podcasts are everywhere, but cutting through the noise is tough. Did you know of the 5 million podcasts worldwide? Half of them only get 30 listeners? Want to reach a bigger audience? Think radio. Talkline Network gets you targeted listeners who are ready to engage with your message. Host your own show with us and supercharge your podcast's reach. We'll help you connect with the right audience. For a free consultation, call Talkline Network today at 212-769-1925, extension 100. That's 212-769-1925, or email zevbrenner@gmail.com. That's 212-769-1925, extension 100.
This is your number one station.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. Our guest, Spencer Schmelke Diamond, grew up in a traditional Jewish home. His father was a Supreme Court judge, his mother's attorney, and he grew up secular. He gave up the American dream. His family was 100 years in the United States, and now went from being a Chabadnik to a Satmar Chassid. Here's an email question, and Ira writes, and I will define this. So Ira writes, what is Tues? Please translate, Zeb. Thank you. Shavua Tov. For those that don't know, the most important part of the Passover holiday, the Pesach holiday, is having what's called a Seder. That means an order where you have a whole ritual on Seder night. If you have more than one, it's Sederim. So that's what it really is. And I think the majority of American Jews, at least from the polls that I've seen, celebrate in some manner. As our guest has been celebrating the Passover holiday. Some of them will even go to a restaurant and have matzah, which I'm hearing for the first time. So what made you decide to become a Satmar Chassid? You were studying with a Chabad rabbi, you like him, you're in touch with him.
Yeah, so that was sort of, I mean, obviously we don't have all night to go over my, journey, but I was never really a Chabad Chassid because that Rabbi Gazinski, I had met him a few times in high school, but, the relationship kind of, I stepped back because I just didn't know what to do. I was so overwhelmed with it. And, to kind of summarize, I did become from when I was 18. It was incredibly painful. It was several months after my 18th birthday. And, that Jewish guilt, as we would call it, even back on Long Island, came in about, you kind of told yourself you do this thing, but you didn't do it. So I went back to Chabad, to different shluchim, but I was really inspired by the whole idea of the Baal Shem Tov Kudesh and how, you could be anybody and just be an Eir L'Chiyid, right? It wasn't really about, I was 18, so I knew that I wasn't going to turn back time and go to Lakewood and become like the Rosh Hashiva at BMG, right? So this idea that you could just be a college student and be Ehrlich and Hashem loves you and you can have that same relationship, I thought was incredible. I thought it was, entirely me. I wanted to become a Chassid. I went to Chabad. I was not finding my place there. They have an incredibly, life of true Mesiras Nefesh for, to go on Shluchus itself. I mean, you think of the fundraising and what that does to your social life, how hard it is for your children, for your family. And I just knew that after everything that I'd gone through, I just wasn't up to that.
You didn't want to be a shliach, is what you're saying.
I did not want to be a shliach, and I kind of just wanted to live a quote-unquote normal life.
How do you have from Chabad? There's Babov, there's Ger, there's other Hasidic groups. How do you end up in Satmar?
So I wound up, one of the first things I had done was that I watched a fabulous documentary about Hasidim. This is going back to like 25, 30 years ago, so I hope that you've seen it, called The Life Apart.
A wonderful film. I did see it when it came out.
Wonderful, wonderful. And it was, the last great thing that actually made Orthodox Jews look good. And, I kind of looked at the Kehillas in that documentary. So I did quote shop around, I went to Babov a little bit and then I went here and there. And ultimately that was the year that Satmar, the ex-Satmar people were really starting to go to the media and, twist the knife, so to speak. So I said, look, if everybody's talking against this thing, I've got to go try it out. I guess the rebel in me. So I did as much research as I possibly could on it. I mean, I read, whatever English versions of the Rebbe's writings I could get my hands on. I would even literally just take the online phone book and just go through the numbers in Williamsburg and just call whoever I could to be able to talk and ask those questions.
So,
And
so that because there was in the news and people were tagging, you decided to explore it. And what made you decide this is the path you were going to take?
So I wound up working, actually, Chabad arranged it, a job in the summer in the Diamond District. And the person who was one of the managers of that firm lives in Kiryas Yoel and actually now lives behind me. I went to his home for Shabbos a few times. My whole family was absolutely petrified. I mean, here we're going from like Long Island, Young Israel's bad enough, but like now Kiryas Yoel is, everyone's head was spinning. And after a few Shabbosim, I said, you know what? I really love this and I want to make this part of my life.
So that's when you decided you wanted to become a Satmar Chassid. Now, which one?
Yes.
Which one were you? The Zalis, the Aronis? Which one?
Oh gosh. I am still trying to figure that out myself. I'm actually in my office
You're
and I have.
You're in the Rav Aronis, the Rav Aaron's territory, right?
I am, and I learned in Rav Zalman Leib's yeshiva, and they were both instrumental in my journey. They both did a tremendous amount for me. And I'll throw another grenade at this. There is actually a third Kehillah that nobody really talks about called B'nai Yoel. They're the group of
the Rebbetzin?
Yes, the ones who don't accept any new Rebbe, and also wonderful people who I literally was just with some of my friends from there, 3 hours ago. I'm in my office. You can't see it, but I've got both Rebbes hanging up on the wall. Picture of me with one and then me with another. So pick and choose.
Henya from Crown Heights, go ahead. Your question for our guest.
Hi, it's a comment actually. I happen to be a Chabad woman, but I'm really happy that you found Satmar and that you're happy there. However, you know that it's a good thing that Chabad does do outreach because that's how you got to have your first taste of Yiddishkeit. And that's the way I think when you go into a room and you ask who was touched by Chabad, probably out of 100 people, 98 would probably raise their hand and say we were.
I would have to. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Henya. What were you saying?
I'm just saying, but your story is very interesting. I mean, everybody's neshama belongs to a certain place. I guess, I don't want to say, I'm Chabad. I want to say, I guess you didn't have the schus to be Chabad, but I'm very happy to get the schus to be Satmar because I love Satmars. I love everybody.
I love that. Chabad has also a wonderful attitude where they're embracing of everybody in the Jewish.
So let me address. I want to say two things. First thing is, I could not agree with you more. I have said repeatedly that I owe my existence to Chabad, right? In this from life that I have, the from to have a child, right? And even though my child is named after the Satmar Rebbe, it all started with Chabad. Hashem does everything, but the Lubavitcher was the shliach. And I actually forgot my second point because it's 12 in the morning.
Anyway, Henya, thank you for a good call as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henya. Here's a question from Sylvia. Can Mr. Diamond tell us how he found the shidduch in the Hasidic world? Being that I don't have a single Hasidic relative who would marry a Baal Tshuva, means a returning to Judaism. It's rare or non-existent. How did his shidduch come about?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question. And a lot of people told me that get ready for shidduchim, or even worse, you'll never find one. I was very lucky. My wife comes from Belarus. If anybody does not know what that is, it's a little country in between Russia and Poland. And she was brought in through originally also Lubavitch, and then Stalin kind of took over the Kirov in that area.
Kirov means outreach. I'm getting some emails that not everybody understands all the Hebrew terminology thrown out. So yes, it means outreach.
Outreach, I'm sorry, yeah. And she gave a speech at a school. My shotgun was there. Actually, the principal of the Satmar Girls' School in Borough Park was also there. So everybody said, "Oh my goodness, this is for Shmelky."
Okay, so that was a good question, and it worked out because it is an important thing because Baal Tshuvas have a harder time. in some of the more Hasidic communities, to find, with the exception of Chabad. Chabad's a little different, but Satmar doesn't have a lot of Baal Tshuvas coming to them too, so that makes it a little bit more challenging to get a shidduch.
It was, but the support was 100% there. I mean, my wife wanted a Hasidic person, and I know of quite a few, people who either entered Satmar as Baal Tshuvas or as, Litvish, or changed. I mean, obviously, we don't have that outreach network except in Argentina, but it's doable.
Now, let me ask you this question. All the groups in Satmar have an anti-Zionist theology based on Rav Yoli Teitelbaum's works. Growing up, what was your position on Israel being a Reform Jew? Not all Reform Judaism, for the most part, was not Zionist. In fact, up until the creation of the state, they were pretty much anti-Zionist.
No, the last thing, the Reform movement. I mean, again, I don't know what they're into now. Everybody, we had Israel bonds, and my parents grew up during the 6-Day War, but the Reform movement definitely was not looking for people to make Aliyah and any of that. I can't say it wasn't a thing that we really talked about at home.
Israel wasn't talked about in your household?
I mean, no, unless there was during the Intifada, we spoke about it a little bit, or,
What about the Reform rabbis? Did they talk about it from the pulpit?
I don't remember it. I mean, the little things like, at your bar mitzvah, or when somebody died, you'd get a tree in Israel, right? And it's like, I have so many trees. I wish I could sell this real estate already.
Oh, you have a lot of trees, but Israel was not part of your experience growing up, is what you're saying.
No, no. Other Reform Jews might have had that. There was this thing called the March of the Living, where you go to Poland in high school, and then you go to Auschwitz, and then you go to Israel for a week. And then obviously Birthright, right? Like, how could you forget that? But that was not something, I'm not sure if my cousins went on Birthright. No.
So the basic space incident wasn't part of your day-to-day experience. So embracing the anti-Zionist policies of the Satmar community didn't really change much for you, is what you're saying.
No, and also, I think that what was the Rebbe ultimately afraid of? I mean, the Almoisha brings it out very clearly.
Basically, he doesn't want to stay because of the 3 oaths until the Messiah comes.
3 oaths, right? And the more pedestrian, interpretation of that is because it would lead to the destruction of religious Judaism. And as somebody who grew up on the other side of that, looking in with religious Judaism literally being like a fence to have to climb over, I understood that. I said, well, he has there's a point to all this.
Well, the point is you have more Torah learning in Israel today than anywhere in the world. So if anything, Israel has become, in fact, after October 7th, Israel has become even more religious, more people embracing Judaism. The airways, the music has become more religious. So Israel is a wonderful place. Now, have you been to Israel, by the way?
I have not. And I can't comment on, how many religious Jews there are.
Including in the army, you have, and I actually went to visit the army. We gave out Shalach Manas for a number of years before COVID, and I saw Hasidim in the army, and so people would pay us and really living a religious lifestyle. There has the yeshiva students, heavy Hester yeshiva soldiers in the army. It's a wonderful thing, and you're seeing even more of the Haredim. Nachal Haredi is there. So you have that, and they have a religious lifestyle. So all the propaganda today in Israel, where you have different groups saying, well, you can't be religious in the army, simply not true.
So I think that, we could go back and forth about this all night, which we won't. I think the army forces a lot of people in, has been forcing Bukharim in. And it's wonderful that there are religious people there, and that, that you see that, and I'm happy for that. And again, my view, which is extremely strong, is not a personal view, right? I know that almost everybody who joins the IDF wants to do the right thing, but my understanding of Yiddishkeit does not allow for a state before Mashiach comes in any framework. It simply doesn't exist. if the entity itself is wrong, then there can't be any good offshoot from it. But again, having said that, when I go to my parents, the Young Israel community over there, you better believe it's pro-Zion. And there are some wonderful friends that I have there.
Your parents have become more observant. They become religious, but
yes, they have.
But they have a different perspective on Israel than you have, I guess, from what I'm.
Oh yes, now they've become very pro-Israel. There's a rabbi there who, I don't know if Rabbi Ismach, is fabulous, and he calls it. My parents are not this, but many people have become October 8th Jews. Where they weren't at all identifying with Judaism before October 7th, then they did. But somebody also said after one of the last interviews that I gave that really touched on Zionism. Since October 7th, before there were these two concepts. There was pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, and pro-Yid. We're always pro-Yid. We say Tehillim every single day for the soldiers who were fighting, who were in the IDF. We just don't believe in it. Since October 7th, those two concepts have sort of gotten mixed up, and you have this kind of amalgamation of values, and I think that kind of has to get brought back.
You can go to Israel. The Satmar Rebbe just went to Israel, spent
I could go
on there.
But I'm not going to go to the Koisel because that is what my community demands of me.
But they go to Maroon, which is part of Israel. I know it's right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Okay, here's an email question. Yossi writes, does Shmelky plan on sending his children to the mainstream Satmar schools, and will they accept them? Also, how many other Baal Teshuvas does he know about in Satmar?
So I actually do, Baruch Hashem, have a child, a son, named after the Rebbe, and yes, he's in the mainstream Satmar Moisdes. They were extremely, extremely nice about taking him in. It doesn't have to be said that could be nerve-wracking, right? Because people who grow up have enough issues getting in, but they really couldn't have been nicer. Baruch Hashem.
Here's another question. How does Shmelky deal with the harsh criticism in the commercial section to the interview he did with Nachi Gordon? And what is the reception in Satmar been?
I think the meanest things, so I didn't read a lot of the comments from Nachi Gordon because I'm not really good with social media. I don't know how to read it, but I was particularly offended at somebody saying that I was like a capo in the Holocaust. And then also somebody said that I was overweight, which, take that and run with it.
Why people get personal? Okay.
Okay. I mean,
unfortunately, people get mean spirited. If you want to have a discussion, have an intelligent discussion. Don't get ad hominem attacks. That gets
exactly.
You lose your argument when you start attacking in that manner.
Exactly. But the Satmar people of Hashem were extremely happy about it because, there hasn't been really an English spokesperson for the community in quite a while. I guess with my level of English and understanding and
you have a college education,
articulation,
yes.
And also, but I'm also a very a writer. I've spoken many times, and also I think it was a very big relief for Satmar that you finally had somebody who was not in a Terry Karta, kind of cult, which very distressingly they kind of took the spotlight in the war, and a lot of people confused us with them. I mean, my mother was getting texts from people. They were out demonstrating, and I mean, I promise you, is this your son? Is this Shmelky? We couldn't see close enough. Is this him? And I have to write back, Ma, no, I'm not protesting. And then, so, are these guys your friends? No, they're not my friends. I don't know any of them. There's like 50,000 people living here in Monroe. I don't even, and none of them are in a Terry Karta.
Now, let me ask this. I know that you also are dealing with some medical issues. Tell us about
Yes,
that.
I am. And I think it's wonderful. Thank you for bringing that out. Several years ago, I started having some issues with, pain, extreme pain, and, moodiness. And, today, everything is mental health. Somebody gets a cold and it's already depression. And they said, well, you just have, depression and nothing's wrong with you. And, it wouldn't go away. Then tingling in my hand started. And after many, many, many doctor's visits, I was diagnosed with an advanced form of fibromyalgia, which at this point is not treatable. And then, probably the bigger thing is something called FND, functional neurological disease, which is that I have a lot of the symptoms of MS, right? Multiple sclerosis, which I've been tested for about 4 times in the last year. So I know the MRI thing like really, really well. And the only difference is that with MS, the structure of the brain is actually damaged. With my condition, it's at a molecular level within the brain, and the signals are just not shooting out properly. So we're all kind of waiting for I want to say a cure or whatever. But I remember that somebody who I was close with at one point, and since not been, but somebody who's a very good person, told me when all this started, there's 2 types of diamonds in the world. There's lab grown and natural. And what's the difference between the 2? Lab grown are flawless, and natural diamonds have flaws, but they have their imperfections. But the natural are so much more valuable. And I take that a step further, and I say, a lot of people have something, whether it be somebody's divorced, whether it be a health issue. So, I walk with a cane and I'm 31 years old. The society thinks is wrong with you. And I think that's your magic. That's what makes you you. That's what makes you special. And I think that for me, in my instance, no, I don't appreciate having this, and I kind of wish I didn't. But I had a platform from, the Moment and the Ami magazines, and being a writer and being out there. And if anybody has to deal with this, why not me? So that I can use my platform to help others not feel alone.
Another question comes in for you. What does Shmelky do for Parnassa? That means for income, for those that don't know.
Shmelky was an accountant. And I am, after 7 years in public accounting, I am kind of looking to pivot into something else. I'm not sure what, but I paid my dues.
Okay, so listen, it's fascinating what you've gone through, and hopefully you'll have refuah shlema, and we all pray and hope for that. What was your biggest challenge being a Satmar Chassid, transforming into one?
My biggest challenge, other than, I would say myself. The only person, being self-conscious and letting your anxiety take over. No, you won't make it. You won't make it. You won't make it. Same thing in business. And somebody said to me, the only person recently, just unrelated to that, the only person stopping you is you. And I had tremendous support behind me, but I did not, I just took everything too hard.
And you've eased up, and you're very happy, you're content, and your family has accepted you, so everything is fine without they become observant to you. You say, why did they become observant? You said it was not related to you. What made your family become observant, your parents?
I don't know. My dad actually gave up pork and shellfish in the 80s, but he never imposed it on us. So he always had that real Pintele in him. My mom grew up conservative. But, I think that during COVID, my father was at home a lot. And the Young Israel, where they were living at the time in New Hyde Park, was kind of this small fledgling shul. And they'd need a 10th person. So they'd call him, and, can you come? Can you come? And I guess it spoke to him, which is amazing. And today he sits and learns for I don't know, he has 2 chavrusas, and he's nonstop, and my mother puts up with both of us, and kol hakavod to her.
Yeah, I'll read one more email before we go. Shmelky should become a public spokesman for Satmar. He's good at PR.
Thank you so much. If somebody has a job, sign the X on the line on the check.
Well, your English is, listen, you had a good education, right?
Yes.
You went to college, you had a good public school education, so you know how to speak, you know how to write, so which is a good commodity, because not all the Hasidic yeshivas have the same standards as what you went through, both in public school and college.
Yeah, but I think sometimes the standards are a little too high,
We're in public school?
Yeah, hence the black under my eyes. But thank you so much.
High? In what sense?
The drive to succeed was, and even for the modern Orthodox yeshivas, oh gosh, Ramah, is that the one on the Upper East Side? Is that the famous?
Ramah is on the Upper East Side, correct?
Right. The need to get the highest SAT scores and go to the best colleges. And, my cousin sent to a Jewish school in Florida, incredibly intense, kind of like a Ramah's setup. And they actually interviewed the child for preschool, and the child could get rejected for not being on a high enough academic level. Their child is 10 years old, 12 years old now, and his mother's a surgeon, and the math homework he gets is, you need like a computer to do it. And, I kind of wish that you didn't have that pressure on kids, but I
there's
guess
pressure even in religious schools and Haredi schools to learn Gemara, and you have Mishmar,
yes.
you have learning. So there's a different kind. May not be a secular, may not be pressure to study math, but the pressure to excel in Gemara.
Oh yeah.
So there is pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of growing up, I guess, is how to deal with challenges.
Absolutely.
Good. I'll leave you with a thought about Israel from this week, from the Parsha, and which I loved. I saw that just today, and I really fell in love with this thought. The question is why was Jacob, afraid of Esav, his brother? And the thing is that Esav had only one mitzvah. He lived in the land of Israel. And Yaakov had 613 mitzvahs that he adhered to. That's what the Torah, that's what the teaching, that's what the rabbis teach us. So how you could compare one mitzvah compared to 613, which he did. And the answer is, even in Esav, who is not circumcised, who's not religious, who's not Jewish, but he had the merit of living in Eretz Yisrael, and that's what he was afraid of. That's just how beautiful it is living in Israel. It's even stronger than doing 613 mitzvahs in the Galut, in the exile. Rabbi Moeller is the one that gave that thought that I saw in writing. So it's a beautiful thought. Israel is so much a part of life. And listen, it was the Satmar community does a lot of great work. And I admire the fact that the Satmar went to Israel, spent millions of dollars, may not have visited the Kotel, but visited Maron, and really brought a lot of money to the Israeli economy. So I'm appreciative of that.
I'll leave you by saying that the state of Israel and Eretz Israel are two different things. We don't have a land of Israel now, according to my ideology and my rabbunim. But thank you for keeping this a civil and enjoyable conversation. It was a pleasure, and I met you years ago at a simcha, and I hope I'll meet you again at a simcha.
Looking forward to that, and keep it up, and let me know if you get to be a PR spokesman for the Satmar community. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Spencer Diamond grew up in a traditional Jewish home, ended up becoming a Chabadnik, and then ended up becoming a Satmar Chassid, and he's an accountant, but he's looking to broaden his experiences. Thank you for being part of our show.
Thank you. Good luck.
Good luck to you, and look forward to having you back again. A wonderful